Hunter x Hunter as a shonen anime is a bit lower in popularity than One Piece and Naruto, but the level of enjoyment it gives me is the highest among all shonen anime, even all anime. This is not only because of how wonderful the story is, but also because of how great the characters are. Yes, I've rarely watched an anime where I liked all the characters in it. Even those villains and murderers with countless crimes, it's hard for me to hate them. But if I were to choose from one of these wonderful stories and characters that I particularly like, then I would definitely not hesitate to choose the character from the Chimera Ant Arc, Ant King Meruem. Before I talk about this arc, I first have to explain my understanding of a Chimera Ant, this kind of creature. To sum it up in one sentence, it is the conflict between instinct and self-awareness. After the Chimera Ant Queen consumes humans, the genes of those humans and the ants begin to mix together. Those hybrids are noticeably more self-aware than the other ants. They can talk, have a variety of personalities, and even takes the initiative to ask the queen to give them a name. But at the same time, their instinct allows them to have absolute loyalty to the queen. The existence of each individual is to serve the entire group as a whole, and the center of this group is the king. At the moment the king was born, what he possessed was pure instinct. This instinct suppressed the formation of the king's self-awareness in order to allow the king to rule the world. So, the king in the beginning, other than himself, had no interest in other creatures, or even his own mother. That was why he could kill his mother and subordinates so easily. This is the same for the three guards. Their instincts can make them care about nothing other than the king, even including their own lives. This is especially true when the queen was about to die. Colt begged Neferpito to use her powers to save the queen, but Neferpito said in a playful cat tongue, "That thing is already useless." Because, for the guards, the queen is not their mother, but a tool used to give birth to the king. So, after the king was born, the queen was of no use anymore. When the king and them left the lair and searched for a new residence, they also attacked several humans to hunt, and they also saw the corruption of the human social system. Some incompetent people can rely on blood and special relationships to become kings, and with no effort at all, can get money and power. This fact strengthened the determination of the Ant King to rule the world. In order to better implement this plan, the three guards began to screen the 5 million humans across the country. The strong ones selected can become soldiers to help the king conquer the world. In the 10 days from the beginning of the screening to the end, the king began to play chess with other humans to relieve his boredom. Whether it was Go or chess, the king's progress was very fast, only needing to know the rules and grasp the opponent's rhythm to easily defeat them. It wasn't until the moment when the Ant King met Komugi, the king of Gungi. This girl is noticeably different from the other humans that the king has met. Komugi is a blind person, so when she met the king, she thought that the king was a human and didn't show fear like the other opponents the king has played. Instead, the contrast between her unusual funny appearance and her state when playing Gungi caught the king's attention. At the same time, Komugi's speed of progress in Gungi far exceeded the king's imagination, which also let the king know that beings other than himself can also evolve according to the situation. But at this time, the king just regarded Komugi as a low-level pastime, nothing else. When they continued to play Gungi, the king invented a new strategy. This new Gungi approach even made Komugi hesitate. Just when the king thought that he had finally won against Komugi, she easily resolved the attack and made the king surrender again. It turned out that this strategy was called Kokoriko and was invented by Komugi 10 years ago. The reason she hesitated was that she was the first to invent this strategy, but she was also the first to crack the strategy. No one has used the strategy since it was cracked, and now the king has resurrected her child once more, and at the same time, made Komugi kill her resurrected child again. This was also the first time that the king heard a person speak for such a long time. Komugi's theory reminded the king of his mother who he had killed. Then, the king found an excuse to leave the room, and declared that there will be no break in the next match. At the beginning of the second game, the king started a bet in order to interfere with Komugi's thinking. If Komugi wins, then she can fulfill any wish. If she loses, then she must hand over her left arm. However, for Komugi, she has no value other than Gungi. Her family is not rich, and lives on the money Komugi made in Gungi. If she loses the game, then she will become a burden to the family. So, the punishment of just the left arm is too light, because in every game, she has to gamble with her own life. The king's bet cannot disturb her rhythm, rather, his own emotions are affected. As an apology, the king took his left arm off. This was the first time that the king was injured, and it was also the first time that the king violated his own awareness and obeyed Komugi's words to let Pito treat him. One day after a match, Komugi was curious and asked what the king's name was. For humans, a name is a symbol that distinguishes individuals from a group. Therefore, when the Ant King starts to think about his own name, it means that the Ant King is actively separating himself from the overall concept of the ant group. In other words, it is the king's first self-awareness awakening. But at this time, the king didn't know this concept, so he summoned his 3 guards and asked them what his name was. For proof, the king is a symbol, so no name is needed, and he will step by step help the Ant King become the only king in the world. Yuppie has no interest in this kind of problem at all, because he's the only one of the 3 guards who is mixed with beasts and doesn't have too many human genes in his body. As a result, he only cares about the interests of the group and has no interest in the personalities and names of the individuals. Finally, Pito, who chose to respect the king's own opinions. These 3 completely different answers represent their various personalities. If we assume that they are human parents, Poof is the kind of parent who helps children plan their lives and excessively interferes with their child's behavior. Yuppie is just the opposite. He's the type who will not interfere with the child, as long as the child isn't dead. And Pito didn't choose to ignore or interfere excessively, instead choosing to respect the child's own opinion, which means that Pito is the closest to a human being among the 3 of them. The king's instinct now told him to use his violence to destroy mankind, so he made up his mind to kill Komugi. But his newly born self-awareness told him the fragility and diversity of human beings, so as a result, he killed the eagle and protected Komugi. This kind of conflict made the king feel very annoyed, and more importantly, he didn't even know what he was so upset about. So he started to blame Pito's end for all of his emotions. This allowed Pito to restrict the scope of her end, and also gave the intruder team a chance to invade. At the same time, from the intruder team, some new emotions appeared in the eyes of Gon, just like the king. But this emotion was dark and muddy, completely different from the king's. The next plot took place almost in an instant. With some light in the clouds, Pito thought that there was an enemy invasion and excitedly jumped into the sky to meet the enemy. But as a result, was blown away from one of Netero's attacks, and Zeno's dragon dive also raided the entire castle. The remaining 2 guards were also aware of this attack and made judgments based on their personalities and circumstances. Yuppie's first reaction was to fight the invaders, while Poof rushed to the king's room as quickly as possible. But he also realized that the king wouldn't be in that room. Expectations for the king fell through, and Poof, who was disappointed in himself, loses his ability to act at this critical time. Pito rushed to the place where the king was immediately, but when she arrived at the room, time seemed to stop, and what Pito sees is the already full of negative emotions king, holding the wounded girl, Komugi. Zeno and Netero, who came in as intruders, were also shocked by the scene. The atmosphere of the king and his gentle attitude towards a human girl was completely different from the brutal Chimera ants they had heard of. With the king's head up, time resumed once again. This time, the king asked Pito to heal Komugi in a tone of plea rather than command. Looking at a king like this, Pito shed tears for the first time. Looking at the various changes in the king since birth, Pito's own self-awareness has also slowly awakened. For her, Komugi has become a part of the king, and if she were to die now, the king would no longer be a king. Pito's newly awakened maternal self-awareness and her instinct to protect the king nearly overlapped. So even if the enemy took the king away, she wouldn't follow them, but would continue to treat Komugi. However, Pito did not expect that after the new enemy left, another more terrifying threat would stand behind her. The appearance of Komugi in front of Gon reminded him of Kite, who had been tortured by Pito, which made Gon almost lose his mind and wanted to kill Pito right away. However, Pito didn't fight him as expected, instead turned her hands towards the sky to show that she had no hostility, and declared that she was trying to save the girl. This kind of human-like behavior did not convince Gon, instead led to Gon breaking down, threatening Pito with a calm voice that if she did not heal Kite, that he would kill the injured girl. On the other hand, the king who left the castle of Netero didn't start fighting as Netero had expected. Instead, the king sat down like he was playing gongi and discussed the relationship and future between Chimera ants and humans with Netero. However, Netero didn't choose to continue discussing with the king, but directly started fighting. After all, Netero is just a pawn of the country. If the country wants him to eliminate Chimera ants, he can't disobey this order at all. At the same time, this battle also carries Netero's one desire, which is to ignore all the rules and use his life as a gamble to challenge a strong opponent. Yuppie, who was fighting the invaders under the castle, also began to awaken his own self-awareness. During the battle, he learned to respect his opponents like a human fighter, and even after the battle, those intruders who might threaten the king were spared. In this moment, the positions of all humans and Chimera ants were reversed. For humans, the brutal and cannibalistic Chimera ants began to respect and protect humans, respect their opponents, and wanted to resolve conflicts through dialogue. In contrast, the intruders fighting to defend humanity threatened Chimera ants with the lives of other humans, planning to resolve the conflict through combat. But no matter how many times Netero's attacks hit the king still maintains the same posture, wanting to solve the problems through dialogue. If the king continues to maintain this attitude, it'll be easier for Netero to complete his task. But what Netero really desires is to challenge the strong. Therefore, Netero and the king made an agreement that if the king can beat Netero, then he'll tell the king his name. In order to know his name, the king stood up and began to fight back. In just a few minutes, they fought on the ground to below the ground. Netero's 100 type Guanyin Bodhisattva can be said to be a perfect move. No matter where the enemy comes from, he can react instantly and counterattack. But when he was hit countless times, the king relied on his physical strength and terrain advantages to counterattack by adjusting his position in the shortest time possible. The king also saw another kind of human power within Netero. This kind of power is different from komugi, but the same, in which this power can only be possessed through countless time and effort. This is a process that the top of the Chimera Ants, a powerful king from birth, has never experienced before. This makes him full of respect towards an individual like Netero, and he also began to enjoy this kind of battle just like him. At this time, the king is like Gon during the hunter exam, playing the ball game of Netero with the pure eyes of a child. After countless rounds, the king slowly mastered the rules of Netero's attack and successfully chopped off Netero's left arm and right leg. Just like at the beginning where Netero only used his left arm and right leg to play with Gon. Here, the author almost clearly shows the change between the king and Gon. The current king is like Gon, who took the hunter exam before, learning to understand humans and being curious about everything. Now, Gon is like a newborn king, dominated by the instinct called revenge. Netero, who lost his left arm and right leg, could not cause enough damage to the king even if he were to use the zero hand. When the king thought that the old man in front of him was about to die and could no longer resist, the king suddenly heard a name, Meruem. This is the king's name. But what came with this name was the hostility of human beings, and this hostility, coming from the dying old man, made the king feel fear for the first time. At the end of his life, Netero failed to fight the enemy to the death as he had expected. Instead, by committing suicide and activating the bomb on his heart, he let the miniature rose bloom in this desolate desert. On the other hand, Pito has already cured Komugi and has agreed to accompany Gon to treat Kite. The two remaining guards who are in the castle also have a conflict. For Poof, Yuppie awakening his self-awareness was quite disturbing. To him, now Yuppie and Komugi are both unstable elements, and their existence will obliterate the king's instinct. But after they sense that the king might be injured, Poof's newborn self-awareness is devoured by his instinct for hating the invaders who hurt the king, and for him failing to protect the king. The two of them rushed into the explosion without any hesitation, saved the injured king, and provided their cells for the king to consume in order to restore the king back to normal. As Meruem's body completely recovered and even became stronger, he also lost some of his memories, especially the memories of being with Komugi. Poof believes that for the future of the king, now is the best opportunity to get rid of that unstable element. He cleared all traces of Komugi and cooperated with Yuppie to compete with Meruem, but actually wanted to limit Meruem's actions until Poof found Komugi as a hostage, and Yuppie was responsible for finding Pito and explaining everything to her so that she doesn't tell the king anything about Komugi. However, the current Pito can no longer return to the king's side. When Pito accompanied Gon to find Kite, Pito knew that the Kite now was dead and told Gon the truth. When Pito thought that Komugi was safe as a hostage, in order to prevent Gon from threatening the king, Pito decided to kill him now. After awakening her self-awareness, Pito no longer spoke with that cat-like tone, but instead solemnly said, "Sorry, but for the king, you must die." However, what she didn't expect was that now Gon's soul was completely dead. Trapped in endless accusations against himself and angry at Pito, he chose to use an end contract of himself, using everything he had in the future to get enough power to kill Pito. At the end of her life, Pito's final emotion was gratitude. Gratitude for Gon sacrificing his future, and gratitude for Gon not being able to threaten the king anymore. In the palace at this time, while the king was waiting for Pito, he was also trying to find his own lost memories. Now, Komugi had been taken to a place where the king's end could not reach. In order to better attract the king to the bait, the intruder team deliberately told people who knew Komugi's location to inform the king. In actuality, as Meruem is now, he can no longer threaten mankind anymore, as he has been poisoned by the mass-produced poor man's rose. The same goes for the other two guards. Yuppie, who had been in close contact with the king for the longest, already died from the poison. Poof also found that his body was abnormal, but didn't want the king to worry, so he didn't tell him. As the most poisoned Meruem, he can rely on his body's immunity to support himself for a longer period of time, and he is also aware of it. This caused the king to want to find his lost memory and the person in his memory even more, and thus, Meruem used this N one more time. In this time's N, Meruem found a Chimera Ant that did not appear in his previous N, and after he got Poof's ability, he knows that this Chimera Ant Welfin has strong hostility towards him. Then, Meruem instantly appeared in front of Welfin and asked him if he had killed Yuppie. Compared with the king before he lost his memory, the current Meruem is more rude and relies on instinct, but he also cherishes his subordinates more. In the past, the king will want to kill them because of a mistake or advice from his subordinates. Now, Meruem would be angry with those who killed his subordinates. After knowing that his subordinates concealed things from him, he didn't choose to kill them, but instead chose to understand and accept the challenges. The king's question made Welfin despair. In this moment, he gathered and combined all the things he ever knew in his life to know an excuse in order to survive. After millions and millions of flashbacks passed through his mind, he could only say one word. In this moment, the king's memories were all restored, and Poof, as the only one who could feel the king's feeling, also discovered that if the king's name Meruem means the light that illuminates the entire Chimera Ant population, then Komugi is the light that can illuminate the king. Knowing everything, Meruem seemed unusually calm. He didn't punish Poof for his actions or kill enemies who were hostile towards him. Instead, he thanked Welfin and encouraged him to live like a human. Although Meruem didn't kill Poof, Poof's heart was already dead because he realized that the king of his dreams could no longer be born. Finally, Poof fell into despair and died alone among the people hypnotized by him. At the same time, the king found Palm and announced to her the victory of mankind. Now, he just wants to be with Komugi, and for this reason, the proud king even knelt down and begged Palm. However, Palm prevented the king's behavior and just told him Komugi's location. When the king saw Komugi again as Meruem, she still slept in an unsightly manner like always. But Meruem was different from last time, and with a pleasant tone, woke her up to play some gungi. The author revealed everything about Meruem and Komugi in this last gungi match. They played like ordinary chess players at the beginning and introduced their names before their match. Both sides enjoyed the game, until Komugi used Kokoriko again. Meruem thought it was Komugi just going easy on him and not playing seriously. But with the sound of 462 Spy, Komugi successfully resurrected her child. This kind of emotion and this competition extremely moved Komugi. She once thought that she was a burden in everything other than in gungi. Like the king, Komugi strongly suppressed the development of her self-awareness in order to help her family, and that was why she always appeared to be inferior. Until now, she met a friend who could understand her existence, who didn't dislike her appearance but admired her gungi skills. This is the same for Meruem. During his gungi game with Komugi, he slowly began to understand human beings. He knew the strength of humans and also the fragility of humans. His self-awareness broke through the limitations of instinct, and he began to think from a human perspective. Although he was defeated by human hostility, he was also redeemed by human goodwill. Two different ages, different social statuses, and even the creation of different races seemed to be indistinguishable at this moment. Meruem was afraid that the poison would spread to Komugi and wanted her to leave him. But Komugi chose to stay, and said that when Japanese women get married, they will say their vows to be with each other forever. Some people think that the emotion between them is like a child's affection towards their mother, friendship, or love. But this is not really important. The only thing I know is that there are two corpses holding each other in the underground of the NGL capital. There are also two gungi pieces scattered around them, and an unfinished game of gungi. It seems as if these two creatures are taking a nap, and after they wake up, they will continue their unfinished game.